morning. We're going to just give a brief overview. Right now, things are changing at a rapid rate. So, for example, last night, the governor came out and said that he wanted to cut everybody to cut their people at the workplace by 50%. Last week, we had the Families First Coronavirus Response Act passed, or the FICRA, as I'm calling it. And then we've had a state law saying that if you're in certain industries and your employees have need to get tested, especially like medical industries and like the grocery stores and food and beverage and things like that, they get 4 days of paid leave. So there's been some confusion as how those all work together and what you can do. There's also been a lot of employers who are either furloughing employees or laying them off. And there's been some questions about the difference between a furlough and a layoff. So let me just go over those 4 topics kind of quickly. The first one, the governor insisting that people either work from home or stop working or go into a double shift. That doesn't start till tomorrow. When that starts, it will be prior to the FICRA going into effect, because that doesn't go into effect until April 2nd. So for that gap, you could certainly require employees to use any paid time off they have or any other paid time that you will be providing them. But realize that if you're an employer and you have fewer than 500 employees, once that FICRA Act goes into effect, you will need to pay them 2 weeks of pay if they can't work because of a government order, they can't work because their doctors told them not to, they can't work because they're sick, or they can't work because they're taking care of a family member. If it's for their own reasons that they can't work, then they have to be paid their rate of pay up to $511 a day. If it's because they're taking care of a family member, like a kid who's home from DPS and they can't get daycare, then you have to pay them up to $200 a day. If after those 2 weeks they still have kids at home that can't get daycare, then you have to pay them up to $200 a day for the remaining 10 weeks. And then with regard to the state law of 4 days of sick pay, again, if you're in one of those industries, go ahead and pay that. And then finally, with regard to furlough versus layoff, it doesn't really matter with regard to unemployment. If an employee is gone for at least a week, they can go ahead and apply for unemployment benefits if they are working less than 32 hours a week. Of course, their benefits are either reduced or delayed by the amount that you are paying them out as an employer. So that's kind of my opening statement. Tammeron, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that?
No, I just wanted to clarify. Families First Corona Response Act, FICRA, as Lorrie says, which I like that, it's easier to say. That is an amendment to the Family Medical Leave Act. So you follow a lot of the rules of the FMLA, in other words, the 12 weeks of job protected leave. So that's really the big thing to think about with that. The FICRA amends it to provide some pay for under a variety of conditions associated with the coronavirus. So just sort of a little bit more about that particular change to the FMLA. So I guess
that's a really good addition, Tammeron. Thank you. Yeah, let's get started. Anybody have any questions? Or any questions, Nick?
There are several that came through. And again, everyone feel free to type into the Q&A box and we'll go through as best as we can. With the amount of questions that are coming through, it'll be easiest through the Q&A box rather than the chat function. Let's see here. And you might have answered this one too, but can we talk about the new EFLMA emergency sick leave laws that go into effect April 2nd for 2?
Yes, we can. So if you're an employer with fewer than 500 employees, you're covered. It's for those employees that have to leave the workplace and cannot work at home. So it's really good if you can let your employees work from home, because then you don't have to deal with this law. But if they have to leave and you cannot let them work at home, then you're going to need to pay that 10 days, that first 10 days. It's also true if they're sick, or if their kids are sick, or if their doctors recommended that they don't come to work, you have to pay them. It might be difficult to get doctor's notes during this time, because doctors, as you can imagine, are slammed. I had a conversation with my doctor, and we had it over Zoom, so we did not have it in person. So I think that's going to be the norm. And in fact, a lot of doctors' offices are set up right now so that they only take telemedicine calls. So if at the conclusion of those 2 weeks, then you need to look at whether or not kids are forced to stay at home. I think they're going to be through the end of the school year. That's what I think. As you may or may not know, Governor Polis called on daycare agencies to stay open, so especially employees in critical industries could get their kids taken care of. So what you may find is a lot of parents just do not have access to daycare. So then for the remaining 10 weeks, you're going to have to pay 2/3 of the employee's pay, up to $200 a day.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Oh, and I want to add one more thing.
Mm-hmm.
The IRS came out with really good information about how you get tax breaks. So not only do you not have to pay the FICA, that's one of the ways you get relief for that, you can apply for direct relief. And so I would go to the IRS website and look for that information, because they, for once in their lives, they did a really good job of explaining it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Do employees need to use up their existing sick vacation time prior to employers having to pay them for these various weeks?
Unfortunately, the way the law is written, they do get to hang on to their sick and vacation time. And the employer, this is additional layout on behalf of employers, especially since the IRS is going to refund you for those amounts. What an employee can do is, if they have to stay off those 10 additional weeks to take care of their kid, and you're just paying them 2/3 time, they could elect to use their vacation or sick leave for that additional 1/3 pay.
And what about employers of healthcare providers exemption?
Then employers of healthcare.
Employer of healthcare providers exemption. And if I am stating that correctly, please feel free to re-ask that question again here in a bit.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like, for example, under the governor's order, if there are a number of industries who are accepted from the 50% send your employees home order, and so those employers would not need to send their employees home. I cannot recall an exception under the FICRA. I only know about the exception under the governor's order. I'll certainly look to see if I'm missing something. Do you remember anything, Tammeron?
No.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much. Many nonprofits are not included in the state unemployment insurance system because they can self-insure, enroll in a trust, or are exempt with fewer than 4 employees. Has Employers Council heard concerns from nonprofits that their UI coverage may not be adequate and would have necessarily received federal or state funding assistance that would flow to the state-operated UI system?
Well, I hear you. I haven't heard it so far, just because I've been answering a lot of other questions, but that is a concern. And the problem is, if you want to switch over to being an employer that pays UI, that doesn't really work so well, or it hasn't in the past. So that is going to be a possible a greater hardship for you or your employees because you never expected to, you don't lay a lot of people off, you don't have that issue. So I am not sure what to do about that.
Yeah, I think right now that's still a hole in the coverage at what government, what the governor and what even at federal level have considered yet. So it's a legitimate concern that honestly hasn't been addressed yet.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
How does this impact organizations who are not subject to FMLA?
Well, because of the FFICRA applies to employers with fewer than 500 employees, all the way down to 1. So suddenly you're covered by the FMLA if you have fewer than 500 employees. Now, the Department of Labor can provide some exceptions for those employers who are between 50 and 0. And I'm sure they'll get around to doing that. But I attended, or I actually couldn't attend. I got a summary of a town hall that they had on Friday. They did not answer any questions about that. They were interested in the questions people had because they wanted that to guide their regulations. But their regulations are not due up on their website until April. And if they get them up by April 2nd, I will be shocked. There is a provision in the law for employers with 25 employees or fewer that if they can, under FMLA, you have to bring employees back after the time off. And if you have 25 employees or fewer, then you wouldn't have to bring them back to the same position. You could just bring them back to a similar position. So that's what we know right now, but that's going to be developing as time goes on.
Thank you so much. What kind of paperwork do we need to use if someone is out of work because they tested positive for coronavirus?
Well, there isn't, what kind of paperwork do you have to use? That's, there isn't a form currently available that is what you have to use. What employers are starting to use, and this has been, this is something that's been recommended, is that you have some kind of self-certification that employees fill out something that says that they have tested positive on this date by this doctor, sort of all the information that would typically be part of documentation, and that they sign it so that you have that so that you have that sort of on record. I think it's really a system where they're starting to look at just taking people's word for it if they're not able to get doctors' notes, because as Lorrie mentioned, doctors are not taking the time to necessarily complete paperwork. So if you're trying to get paperwork from somebody, if an employee says they're testing positive or that they've been in contact with somebody who has tested positive, then our suggestion is that you ask them to fill out a form. As I said, I would suggest getting the same information that you would typically get, but there's not a form available. You can make up your own and have them sign it, and it's kind of on the honor system.
Yeah, these are unprecedented times, so we're having to take unprecedented measures.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Are there going to be any supports for programs that are closed and are trying to pay their staff?
Are you talking about program specific? You're talking about programs specific to nonprofits. So are additional, other than pay, there hasn't been any. We're not aware of any additional funds that have been made available through the state or the federal government to just support programs. Are you thinking of programs that might be that, like worker training kind of programs, or programs that are typically part of nonprofits repertoire? Is that what you're?
Feel free to elaborate too within these questions, and I'll be able to track that down as fast as I can. We'll have to, I'll move on for right now, but feel free to, who wrote that in, to type that into the chat as well, and I'll be able to keep an eye on that. Does FICRA, and you might have already answered this, so my apology, does FICRA apply to nonprofits and businesses with less than 50 employees?
Currently, it does apply to businesses and nonprofits with 50 employees or less. We will see what kind of exceptions the U.S. Department of Labor may create for these businesses. But again, that's not supposed to be on their website until April. So, and I don't know when in April. If it's on April 2nd, I will be stunned. So I wouldn't count on that right now, particularly since the IRS is providing basically cash for employers. So I would really go to the IRS website and take a look at what they're providing.
Okay, perfect. Thanks so much. We use a large number of volunteers as part of our workforce. Are volunteers allowed to be included in the total workforce when thinking about the 50% reduction of workers ordered by the governor?
No, right now there's the workforce is just at 50%. I think that if you have volunteers that are working, it would behoove you to follow that the same 50% rule, just out of the spirit of the law. At this point, I don't think that there's any guidance on that.
Thank you so much. What is the latest guidance on WARN, on WARN? Do we expect there to be exceptions for the 60-day notice during this time?
There are exceptions for the 60-day notice at this time. There's a provision under WARN that says that if, you know, I don't remember the exact language, but if it's wholly unexpected, you don't have to give the 60 days notice. You still need to give notice as soon as you figure it out. But the 60 days notice is, there is an exception for that.
Okay, thanks so much. Families First Act says the first 10 days are unpaid and employers cannot force employees to use their paid time in the first 10 days. Not sure if you want to elaborate on that. It doesn't seem to be in a question format, but.
Yeah, it does say the first 10 days are unpaid if it's some other kind of leave that has nothing to do with the coronavirus. So if I'm out on leave because I have to go for a heart operation, you don't have to pay those first 10 days. I only have to be paid the first 10 days if it's a COVID-related reason that I described when we started.
Thank you so much. Do you have any information on the third COVID bill in Congress and the element of small business loans and forgiveness for using the loan to pay payroll?
I do not at this time. All I heard this morning is that the Democrats and Republicans are fighting about it.
Yeah, it's on hold, right? Well, we assume it's moving, but it has not progressed through Congress.
Perfect, thank you so much. And to the question about resources and websites, we'll be following up by email to everyone soon regarding any kind of resources or websites that have come to mind or that we think of to send.
And just so you know, if you go to employerscouncil.org website and scroll down to the bottom, you can see all of our articles on the coronavirus issues.
We are paying our employees who cannot WFH for 2 weeks work from home. Should their PTO accrual continue during this time?
That's a good question.
That's really up to you. Yeah, it depends. If you have policies, I mean, it would be unusual if you'd have policies since this is such an extraordinary time. I think that from a practical standpoint, if you can verify that people are working from home, you have some kind of system in place that you can verify, you might allow them to continue to accrue PTO.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Because FSICRA is an amendment to FMLA, if an employee has already used their 12 weeks of FMLA, are they still eligible for any additional paid time off and protected leave?
That's a really good question.
I think we're going to have to research that and get back to you.
Yeah, I have no idea. Because the whole purpose of the act is to get employees through the coronavirus and to have the government pay employers to help them do that. So my guess is it's going to be an addition, but I do not know.
We actually have differing views on that. I've heard here at the council, we've had discussions from some groups of lawyers who say that it is in addition to the 12 weeks already established through FMLA, and others who have said that this is simply an amendment to the FMLA and amends it in the form of payment and increasing the number of employers that are covered under FMLA and does not increase the 12 weeks. So we have two different opinions that might be, both of them are reasonable opinions. We're still trying to figure that out. We're hoping that some additional clarification comes through from the regs from the Department of Labor. But right now, that's kind of an unanswered question.
Thank you so much. In Families First Act, termination of sick time scenario, let's say, if an employee is off for, say, 3 days to care for a child, then returns to work on day 4, so comes to work on day 4, does the employee lose the remaining days or have to wait the 10 unpaid days again? Or do they lose the remaining days?
I would say they do not. I think intermittent leave is going to apply and they wouldn't lose the remaining days.
Okay, thank you so much. If employees do not have paid sick leave now, but have been off this week due to fever, can I use the FFCRA payroll tax credit even though it is not in effect until 4/2?
That's an excellent question. Unfortunately, no, you're going to have to wait until 4/2.
What kind of paperwork is needed for furloughing employees?
There is no paperwork needed for furloughing employees. I would want to explain to employees what the furlough entails, what are the conditions of the furlough, when you expect them to bring them back to work, all of that, what jobs you would expect to bring them back to, all of that good information. You may, if you're gonna, some employers I know are going to pay employees while a certain amount while they're out on furlough. And so those employers are also have an agreement with the employees that they will not, that they would release them from any employment claims in order to get that money during the furlough. So there are things that you may want to do, but there's nothing required.
Yeah, the only thing practically that I'd suggest is that you kind of make sure that whatever you tell employees, when you get the paperwork from unemployment, because we're anticipating that unemployment will still be sending out paperwork to employers to verify the conditions of the employee's unemployment. And you just need to be consistent. Make sure that you're that what you're telling employees is consistent with what you respond to the unemployment with.
Thank you so much. And a question just came through. I think it's a good question as well here for clarification. What is FICRA and what is WARN? W-A-R-N.
Okay, so FICRA, it's actually FFCRA, Families First Coronavirus Response Act. And the WARN is the Worker Adjustment Renotification. I can't remember what WARN stands for.
Let's see.
Tammeron will look that up. Tammeron will look up the WARN. Thank you, Tammeron.
Worker Notification Act for layoffs.
Is what it is. That's what it is.
All right, thank you so much. For those who have been out on FFCRA leave, are they subject to layoff just like everyone else?
I'm sorry, it's Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act.
So whether or not people are subject to layoff during this FFCRA law is a delicate question. We think that there's going to be a desire to lay people off before the act goes into effect, or to to go ahead with your layoffs. And my concern is that because this is such an extraordinary time, and because the government has created a scheme for paying employers who need to have when employees need to be at home, that if you lay somebody off, you may end up running afoul of the law. There is no such law. That's not clear right now. So for example, I had a member who is a city government contact me. They shut down their rec center. They're not employing anybody at the rec center because they shut it down. And they wanted to know if they should let the FFCRA benefits run out before they laid off the employee. And I suggested that they do just that.
Thank you so much. Out of an abundance of caution, it seems like doctors are writing notes regularly, easily, saying that people should not be going to work even if they do not have COVID-19. Do we have to grant them PTO for this, or can we require them to first utilize their PTO?
I don't think so. I think you're going to have to follow those doctors' notes and grant them leave under the FFCRA. Thank you for answering that. What if you don't have a sick leave policy and just offer PTO? Would we just give additional PTO? It doesn't really matter what you call it, as long as you follow the precepts of the act.
One thing is this doesn't accrue. So if it doesn't get used during this time, it's not going to accrue beyond the extent of the coronavirus. So eventually things will return to something approaching normal, and at that point you don't have to have leftover leave from the FFCRA available to employees.
That's an excellent answer, Tammeron. And I forgot to say that the FFCRA expires December 31st, 2020.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I saw a question come through here a little bit ago. Are you able to go through the time off rules again that were stated at the beginning regarding rules for first 2 weeks, payments after the first 2 weeks, et cetera, in terms of what
Sure.
employees need to pay?
Sure. During the first 2 weeks, if an employee has a reason to be at home under COVID, either the government said they had to be at home, the doctor recommended that they had to be at home, which is a pretty low standard. They are sick and they have positive test results, or their kids or family members are sick and they've got to take care of them, they get leave, paid leave for those 10 days. If it's for them, it's their regular rate of pay up to $511 a day. If it's for somebody that they're caring for, it's $200 a day. So that's the first 10 days. The next 10 weeks, the pay they get is only if they have to take care of kids who are either sick or have to be at home because they can't be at school and there's no daycare. Then they can get paid for the 2/3 days. They get paid up to $200 a day, or their regular rate of pay, whichever's most.
Thank you so much. For first responders, can they claim workers' compensation if they contract COVID-19? And if so, when would you first file or first report?
Well, any worker can claim that what they're doing is creating illness for them, and the employer's best bet always is to assume that that workers' comp will allow that, and then send the claim over to workers' comp and see what they have to say.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Are there any laws/rules we should be aware of about asking employees to take a reduced salary?
as far as you can certainly ask employees, you can certainly cut employee salaries across the board by some amount, or higher paid employees get a bigger percentage of a cut. You can develop those kinds of schemes. You just want to follow the FLSA rules. You still have to pay minimum wage. You still have to pay overtime. You still have to pay your non-exempt employees a certain amount for them to, or I'm sorry, you have to pay your exempt employees a certain amount for them to maintain their exemption. So you have to follow the FLSA rules, but you can certainly cut employees' pay.
Thank you so much. And following that too, a question somewhat related here. Can a non-exempt salary employee file for unemployment when their pay is lowered, but they are still working? What about if they're furloughed? Can benefits be continued in either case?
If an employee's, let me see, okay, so if an employee's salary is cut, they can quit and file for unemployment. It may be that employees won't quit during this time because they may find that the pay cut they're receiving is going to be more than their unemployment benefits. If they're furloughed, they need to wait a week and then they can file for benefits. And as long as they're working less than 32 hours a week, they can get those benefits.
Okay, thank you so much. Does FMLA also cover care for parents or other family members if they get sick?
The FMLA does. The Families First Act only covers paid time in those 10 weeks if it's a kid and your kid. And they expanded that, so like if grandparents have to take care of kids, then that would count.
So okay, thank you so much for that answer. What if they are sick yet do not have COVID positive tests or they're waiting results? Is the employee still covered under FFCRA?
Yes.
If you typically don't have work from home for your employees, WFH, is there anything we should be doing to add locations to workers' comp coverages? Or will employees be covered no matter where they are working?
You should call your carrier, but they'll cover them no matter where they're working. And I'm sure that they want them to work from home, so they're going to cover them.
Feel free, everyone. If I happen to have missed your question, you can type them again in that Q&A section. I'm going to be going through this again now. Here's a question that came through. I heard, and this might have been answered too from a little bit ago. I heard that in Seattle, there is now a movement to exempt nonprofits from paying lease payments during this time. Any idea if this would happen in Colorado?
I wouldn't be surprised. I know the governor has told landlords not to evict people. They want people to lay off mortgage charges. There's a lot of small business loans out there. What I might do is go take a look at the governor's website. Another website you might want to take a look at is the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce. They have a lot of information about small business loans and information like that.
Thank you so much. Do you have any information for child care programs when forced to close and have business liability insurance will lose revenue by covered due to this pandemic?
That's really outside our area of expertise. Again, I would go to the, if there's a state agency that child care providers are licensed under, I would go to that agency's website.
Thank you so much. Will employers be penalized with their unemployment insurance if they lay off or furlough their employees?
You mean, are you talking about that their premium would go up or their costs would go up? If that's the question, the answer is we honestly don't know. We would anticipate that not happening, but that might be a particularly optimistic point of view.
Thank you so much. Does any of this apply to organizations with contractors? Who's responsible for paying the sick person $500 per day?
Oh, no, it's only your employees. Do be sure that you have properly classified workers as employees. There's information on the IRS website about that, but bottom line, if somebody is doing the work of your organization, then they are typically going to be regarded as an employee. If somebody's doing work that you don't do in your organization, so for example, a plumber coming in to fix your pipes, that's an independent contractor. Somebody coming in to fix your computers, if you don't have an IT group, that would be an independent contractor. But if your job, for example, is to provide daycare, and you hire somebody to provide that daycare, that's an employee.
Thank you so much. Can you talk about our options as employers as a response to COVID, our revenues declining? Do any of the new rules impact our ability to do layoffs, decrease pay, hours, etc.?
Again, I do believe if you are going to lay people off, you really need to take in consideration the FFCRA and take a careful look at that and talk to somebody about that. Make sure you don't just lay people off without considering that. Otherwise, I would say that the new rules really don't impact that. That's the one area where it will impact that.
Thank you so much. Is taking care of a spouse covered under FFCRA?
It is for the first 10 days.
Thank you so much. For furloughed employees, do we keep their benefits active?
That's a really good question. You need to look at your documents. You might want to talk to your benefits broker, or if you're fully insured, your carrier, and look at your plan documents. Some employers are paying premiums for a month or two to help employees that have been laid off. That may interfere with their unemployment amounts.
Yeah.
But you really need to look at your plan documents as far as, can you do that? I mean, that's certainly something that employers are trying to do, and it depends on how much you put towards that. Sure.
Well, it's also true that under that FFCRA, they accounted for benefits and said that the government will reimburse you for benefits you pay. So I would take a look at that as well. I'm not sure how that works if your employees are laid off, but I would at least take a look at that.
Thank you so much. Can you talk about unemployment and layoffs versus the SBA forgivable loans? If we lay off people, we are not eligible for these forgivable loans, correct?
I don't know. That's outside. Understanding the SBA loans is a little bit outside our area of expertise. We'll see if we can find that information easily.
Okay, thank you so much. So just to confirm, the government will be reimbursing us for these payments? Question mark. How do we report on this and file claims, etc.?
That's where you need to go to the IRS website and take a look. They're doing it in several different ways, and you'll want to read through that carefully. The IRS guidance on this is excellent, so I would take a look there.
Typically through Social Security and through FICA.
Yeah, that's what it's done typically, and they're expanding on that. So that's why I'd want to go take a look at the website.
Okay, thank you so much. Going back to the paperwork required from employees out sick, is the self-certification or doctor's note based on actual test results? What about employees who have seen for another health concern and they were told they could have COVID-19 but no test given?
Then that would fall under the doctor's recommendation under the law, under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, and you would want to treat that as a reason to pay that employee for those first 10 days.
Thank you so much. My nonprofit is totally shut down. I have 3 employees, including myself. Can I lay off all of us, and can all of us apply for unemployment?
Yes.
Yes. You might want to think about the process that you'd put in place for rehiring.
Does employer council have a white paper, in quotes, on FFCRA that really has things broken down for the layman to understand?
What we have right now is, if you're a member, we are developing that. If you are not a member, go to the public facing page, and we have an article that I think is very good that lays it out pretty clearly.
That's employerscouncil.org, our website.
And we'll follow up everyone too with some of these sites that are mentioned and things that are referenced as well. We'll follow up by email. When did or does the 10 days begin for FFCRA?
Well, it begins on April 2nd. So it goes from April 2nd to April 12th, or not, I'm sorry, 10 work days. So whatever, so it actually go till the 16th. And then any day that your employee's out. So if everybody's fine and they're all working, then it wouldn't count. But once they have to stop work, then it would start to count through December 31st.
Thanks so much. If all employees are part-time nonprofit, do you still pay the 10 days?
Yes, but you pay a proportional share.
Can you speak more to your comments regarding planning a rehiring process?
Well, if you have who's gonna the question is who's gonna make the decision to rehire? I assume that would be the executive director or maybe the chairman of the board. But who's going to be making that process? Once you do the layoff, you want to kind of think about who makes the decision to start rehiring and who gets called. How are you going to notify employees to get started? What kind of communication do you expect from the 3 employees in the case that was brought up? The 3 employees who are being laid off along with the ED. What kind of communication do you expect to have with them during this time of uncertainty while everything's shut down? So that's what I mean by a rehiring plan, kind of when the decision's going to be made, how the decision's going to be made, and then how are employees notified about that decision and about moving forward when restrictions start to ease.
Perfect, thank you so much. If we pay benefits for a month or 2, will it impact their ability to get health insurance on the exchange later?
That's a really good question. I know that the governor has reopened the exchange, but I don't know how long that's for, so we can look into that.
If you are a nonprofit with less than 50 employees, does that change the FFCRA rule? Are we not supposed to utilize this? And what is the paperwork required?
First of all, we don't know if that changes the FFCRA rule. The Department of Labor will come out with information on its website in April, and then they would determine if there was any paperwork required.
Perfect, thank you so much. And again, everyone, I will go ahead and see what questions I might have missed above, but feel free to also, if I did not answer it, type that question into the Q&A box, and I will be able to answer that accordingly. If we began giving paid time off to employees already, i.e. prior to April 2nd, will we be able to get reimbursed for days paid prior to April 2nd?
I wish you could, but no, you have to, those reimbursements will start on April 2nd.
Is there more information on what job sharing would look like and how that would affect employees' ability to file for unemployment benefits?
Well, if an employee works less than 32 hours a week, they can file for benefits. So if let's say you're going to reduce and have people work reduced hours, if it's under 32, they can get some unemployment benefits during this time. It's called job attached unemployment because they're still attached to a job, but they're not getting the full payment, so they get some benefit.
And really what that means is that the people who are receiving the unemployment benefits are relieved from the responsibility of looking for another job. Doesn't change their amount of benefits. Typical unemployment requires that people who are receiving unemployment are looking for another job. That will not be the case if employees file for unemployment with job attached or a furlough.
Thank you so much. How does the Colorado Help Plan work with the FFCRA, or is it separate?
It's separate.
Are we able to, can we lay off some employees but keep others depending on job function?
Yes. You'd want to make sure that you have sound business reasons for why certain employees are kept and certain employees are laid off. But like any downsizing or layoff, you don't have to do your entire workforce. And you could do things like reduce the hours and reduce the pay of some employees, lay off some employees and keep other employees working full-time at a reduced salary, for example. So you can manage your workforce in whatever way that makes business sense. You just have to make sure you're doing it in a non-discriminatory fashion.
Perfect, thank you so much. I'm an ED of a nonprofit and have deferred my pay until the organization can pay me. If I apply for unemployment and work less than 32 hours a week, can I still be reimbursed by my nonprofit later for lost pay?
That would depend on your agreement with your nonprofit. So that you'd need to talk to them about that.
Thank you so much. Would you suggest laid off employees utilize COBRA, COBRA, or the exchange if they lose medical benefits?
I think it comes down to cost. COBRA can be expensive. The exchange has also been reported to be expensive, but I think that you'd probably want to look at the cost, and all the rules around COBRA still apply. So employees have 60 days to provide notice and then 45 days to make payment on the first COBRA payment. So that should give employees enough time to look at the exchange and see which cost makes the most sense for them.
Thank you so much. Where can I find the info about proportional pay for laid off part-time employees?
I don't know what kind of information you're looking for. If it's unemployment information, I would go to the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment and look on that website.
Thank you so much. Does the FFICRA override the Colorado 4 days of sick pay? Could you explain that dynamic?
Oh, that's a really good question. So it does not override it. You have to do what's ever most beneficial to the employee. So if the state requires 4 days of pay if somebody is going to get tested in a particular industry, so you need to go ahead and provide that. So let's say I got paid $512 a day under my pay, then those first 4 days I'd have to be paid at $512 a day. And then if I had to stay at home for the rest of those, for the rest of the time, then you can pay me $511. Don't have to pay me twice for the same work day or sick day.
Does Colorado Help, HELP, apply to hospices? Do we fall into that home health category for employees that must comply?
We'll have to look that up. I believe so.
Thank you so much. If you need to lay off employees because they're not in the position to work from home, do we need to pay them any vacation time they have on the books?
Yes.
And what if nonprofits can't pay though, and they don't have any funds or reserves?
Well, then you're in violation of the law. You might have to file for bankruptcy if you can't get an SBA loan, and then the bankruptcy court would put the employees on the top of the list for getting paid. If employees are furloughed, I think you can delay the vacation. If you end up discharging those employees, then you would have to pay it out.
Thank you so much. And again, anybody, if I missed your question, now is a great time to go ahead and retype that in. My apologies if I'm missing several that scrolled up top. Feel free to just retype that in and I will get to that. We have been paying employees and have said we will make a decision this Friday as to how or if we can continue to keep employees paid / working. Will we need to pay them? Will we need to then pay the additional 2 weeks per FFCRA?
Well, again, my advice is if the employee is being let go because of COVID, because you can't have them work in the workplace for some reason, my advice would be to pay them under COVID and get the reimbursements from the IRS. But if that's not the reason is the layoff and you don't have any more money, then I would lay off the employees and let them know you can't pay them anymore.
Thank you so much. If we lay off an employee and we have a provision in our employee guidelines that we don't pay for unused vacation, do we need to pay for vacation after the layoff?
The Colorado Department of Labor has determined that that there is payment for unused vacation. This is a legal question that's pretty complicated. So you would want to talk with a lawyer about this because what the Department of Labor is insisting on and what the statute says are a little bit different. So you'd want to decide how you handle that.
That's an issue that goes beyond COVID and our current situation. Because the statute was in place prior to our current circumstances coming up. So if employees have vacation on the books and your policy is to not pay them at termination for that vacation, if you're a member of the council, you can call us and we can help you with that, or the lawyers can help you with that. Or can help you sort of sort that out a little bit, but that is an issue that is beyond just the current circumstances.
Thank you so much. Just to give everyone a time heads up, we have 5 minutes remaining and want to respect that time as well. I do want to take this time to mention that we will be providing links and resources in the follow-up email, and we will also have this session recorded and up on our website as well. And we will be hosting more of these on April 6th, April 20th, and May 4th at 9:30. And I will be following up by email to repeat that as well. Are there any circumstances that apply differently to nonprofits versus for-profit businesses?
Unfortunately, there are not.
Currently, there aren't.
Okay, thank you so much. If an employee, and this might have been answered, so my apologies here too. If an employee qualifies for COVID-19 reasons after April 2nd, do we pay benefits for Colorado Help and FCCRA at the same time? Do employees get both benefits or does FCCRA only get paid after April 2nd?
FFCRA only gets paid, well, you would actually look at the benefits under each, and whichever benefits the employee most, they would get paid for as long as that legislation says that they have to be paid, or regulation.
If an employee raises their hand, also thank you for answering that. If an employee raises their hand to take an unpaid sabbatical, can that be with the understanding that the unemployment isn't provided?
Employees can choose not to apply for unemployment, and that's fine. Nobody has to apply for unemployment. So if there's an employee who, or there's several employees who are voluntarily saying we want to do financially what's best for the nonprofit, and we're just going to take a sabbatical, an unpaid sabbatical, then they can choose not to go to unemployment. So that's sort of, you can't require that employees not go to unemployment, but you can certainly, they don't have to go.
Thank you for answering that. Can exempt salaried employees file for unemployment when their pay is lowered but are still working? And
Yes.
what about, yeah, and what about furloughed? Can employer provided health benefits continue while an employee receives unemployment?
Yes, they can.
And you should look at your plan documents if you're going to continue to offer health insurance to employees who aren't working.
Yeah, there's no law against it, but Tammeron's right. You might have your plan documents may prohibit it.
How does furlough operate with programs like WorkShare provided by the state?
I'm not sure. Do you know the answer to that?
There's a WorkShare site on the state, and I haven't looked at that in detail. What I think it allows is that that exempt employees share a job, and that they can still apply for unemployment for partial jobs. But I can look into that in more detail.
Thank you so much. And with time here, everyone, I'm going to have this be the last question. Again, we will be following up by email and with the further sessions that we will be hosting as well. Are there later financial repercussions to organizations when a number of employees file for unemployment that we need to consider and plan for? We've never had an employee take unemployment before.
It depends on whether or not you have paid unemployment benefits to employees. If you've paid unemployment benefits to employees or on behalf of employees, then you don't have any, then your financial obligations would be done. They may raise your experience rating, but other than that, that would be done. If you chose to pay unemployment on your own rather than using the unemployment insurance system, then you may have significant financial obligation.
Thank you so much. And before I wrap up here, would you like to say anything else, Lorrie, Tammeron? Any thoughts before I wrap up?
Well, Lorrie and I will get together after this meeting and kind of go through the notes that I've taken as far as what we're going to be following up on. And I assume, Nick, that we can get that to you?
Yes, that'll work perfectly.